Principal Matters Podcast, episode 462. Hi, friends. This is Will Parker, host of Principal Matters, the School Leaders Podcast, where each week we bring you inspiring, innovative, and imaginative ideas for your own school leadership. And I'm back with my co-host, Dr. Jenn Schwanke. And Jenn, we're going to listen to part two of an amazing conversation with Jen David Lang and Kim Marshall about just some of the amazing work they've done about curating research on supporting strong teachers. And instead of a Q&A before their episode today, I just wanted to tell you a quick story and just chat a little bit about PD with teachers. So I was doing some staff development recently at a school in Ohio. So it's back in your great state. Mm-hmm. And I always do this, not always, but I consistently do this when I'm working with a group of people, especially if it's in a setting where it's small enough that I feel like it's a classroom. Even though sometimes I can make a classroom out of lots of people.
Right.
But I like to ask people to think about a number between 1 and 10. 1 being, I am physically present with you, Will, but I will be politely bored because I have so much on my mind and I'm just not ready to learn. Or 10 being, I am physically, emotionally, I am not only present, but I plan to be engaged, active. I'm going to try new learning in this moment. And so I just tell people, all right, somewhere between 1 and 10 is a real number. Pick that number and I want you to commit to it. And then make that your learning commitment as we're talking today. So I was doing a half day PD, Jenn, and you know how that is because you're trying to manage, about 3 hours of content and learning together. And you're trying to think about when are appropriate breaks and how often we want people pair and share or standing or sitting. And there was a teacher and I'm not going to name him, but I just thought this was such a fun story. There was a teacher I met right at the very beginning. And of course, I try to also greet everyone in the room, just like I would if they were my students. And he was a guy probably about my age. And he told me what he did and what he taught. And I said, well, I'm looking forward to learning together today. And he said, okay, we'll see. And I thought, oh, this is going to be great. And so we went through the day of learning. And at the very end of the day, he came up to me and he said, well, I hate to admit this. When you ask us to choose a number between 1 and 10, I chose a 1 because I was tired and I did not think that I was going to enjoy learning today. He said, but today was so engaging that I have not been able to stop being, learning and applying. And so I'm just walking away with so much learning. And I just wanted to set on that one, Jenn, because sometimes it's just fun to celebrate learning moments. But 2, because I wanted just to ask leaders out there to think about how they may apply that to their own day, their own mindset, their own leadership, and their own working with teachers too. So I just thought that was a fun story. Thoughts or reflections?
Well, what I love about that story is that you didn't go to a place of anger or frustration because he was, when he said, yeah, we'll see. You knew what he was saying to you. Mm-hmm. He was saying, I'm a 1. You knew exactly what that meant. And that would be easy to take as a kick in the face, but you took it as a challenge. So kudos to you. Because we have to know there's a lot of people out there that when they walk into a PD, they think, I just don't want to be here. Mm-hmm. I'm putting on the right face, but I'd rather be in my classroom getting things done. And so, it's funny, as we record this earlier today, I went to probably 5 or 6 different buildings and saw a lot of PD going on. And in every room, there's some people that would just rather not be learning. But what I do think is this is the oldest, most basic thing in the book. There needs to be a reason that it's valuable, and they need to know that reason, just like students do. And sometimes the reason is, hey, we have to learn this new walkie-talkie system because it keeps us safer. I know this isn't riveting. I know this isn't going to change anyone's world, but it is going to help you make the appropriate distress call if needed. So we're going to spend 15 minutes with these new walkie-talkies. Sometimes it just is what it is, but the rationale still needs to be, we've got to learn it because.
Well, I'm glad you said that. And Jenn, I've had the privilege to sit through some of your presentations too. And so, I know these are 5 or 6 minute Q&As before we introduce our guests, but that's such a great takeaway. And I'm just curious, anything else that goes through your mind when you're stepping into adult learning that you try to be intentional about, just like you would with students?
Well, I try to be funny because people like to laugh and a little self-deprecating and admit to my flaws or admit to the times that I was a one. I really try to make my presentation fit to what they need. And so a lot of that happens in the foreground before I'm
Mhm.
even in the room with a group of principals or teachers. I try to work with whoever it is organizing it. Say, tell me about them. Tell me what their mindset is. Tell me their previous learning. Tell me what they think we're doing today, and tell me what you want to get out of it, because I will tie those two pieces together, what they think they're getting and what you want them to get. So you really do have to have those conversations with the organization's organizer, so to speak, so that you walk in ready. I have never, thank goodness, led adult learning where I was delivering something nobody thought I was going to do. So it's
Mhm.
because of that front work that
Yeah.
that happens.
No, I agree with all of that. And, the humor, the being self-deprecating, the being able to fit it to the moment. One of the things I'll often do when I'm realizing there are people there that feel forced to learn, like that gentleman that is, I'll usually start with why I'm here, um, and thanking them for the invitation, but then also a quick apologies that I'm sorry you're here because, and they always laugh, because everyone wants to be doing the other thing that they want to be
Right.
doing, and so sometimes just acknowledging the elephant in the room brings down that anxiety. But our listeners are leaders of learning, and I know that they're going to be stepping into a school year where they're often pulling people in for engagement and focus. And so I think I'll just leave the conversation, Jen, by saying, no matter what room you're in, how do you create the kinds of moments you would want to be in?
Right.
So even if that's a quick 15-minute conversation or a 60-minute, how do you keep creating the conditions that you would want to be in? Because at the end of the day, if you're doing that, then you're putting yourself back into the mindsets of your students or your staff, so that
Right.
um, they don't feel uh, beat up by information. They feel encouraged and elevated by
Right.
what they're
Right.
receiving too.
Right.
Wow, Jen, we could have a whole nother
I
episode
know.
just on
I was
that.
just
That would
gonna
be so
say
much
this
fun.
is
Yeah,
this is
this would be,
bigger.
yeah,
I have so many more thoughts. I'm
yeah,
showing a lot of restraint right now.
yeah.
So
We'll circle back to that sometime. But listeners, I know you're going to love this conversation with Jen David Lang and Kim Marshall as they talk about part two of just what the research says about supporting teachers. So stay tuned, and thanks for doing what matters. And we'll talk to you soon. Let's take a moment to thank our sponsors, and then we'll be right back. At Principal Matters, we talk a lot about leadership, culture, and building strong school communities. And this fall, I want to invite you to a powerful event where we will take those conversations even deeper. On September 24th through 25th, Aptigy's School CEO Conference in Little Rock, Arkansas, is bringing together K-12 leaders from across the country to explore one big question: how do we break through the noise and connect with families in today's competitive education landscape? This year's theme, What Parents Want, dives into research-driven strategies for parent engagement, enrollment growth, and building trust. You'll learn how to reach today's families with clarity and purpose, how to stand out from other districts, and how to use digital tools that actually work. Day one is hands-on workshops, and day two will be back-to-back keynote speakers, including one from me. With only 500 seats and no vendors, this is more than a conference. It's an experience. Learn more at aptg.com/conference or visit schoolceo.com. I hope to see you there. Why is IXL used in 95 of the top 100 U.S. school districts? Because it works. Research across 45 states shows that IXL schools outperform other schools on state tests. With IXL, you get a personalized online learning and teaching solution that helps you improve achievement, empower teachers, track progress, and more. This one platform for K-12 helps teachers accomplish what normally would require dozens of other tools. For example, as students practice skills, IXL automatically adapts to ensure each learner is always supported and challenged at the right level. IXL also provides every student with a personalized learning plan to help them close knowledge gaps effectively. One of my favorite things about IXL is their personalized test prep tool. For exams like the SAT and ACT, IXL will analyze the student's most recent score and generate a custom list of skills to help them boost their scores. If you want to take the load off your teachers so they can do their best work, IXL can help. Learn more at IXL.com/PM.
You're listening to Principal Matters, the School Leaders Podcast.
Hi, friends. This is Will Parker, host of Principal Matters, the School Leaders Podcast, where each week we bring you inspiring, innovative, and imaginative ideas for your leadership. This week, we're going to talk about supporting new teachers, part two, with my special guests, Jenn David Lang and Kim Marshall. Kim Marshall is the creator of the Marshall Memo, I'm going to say world-renowned source for summaries on research and education. And Jenn David Lang is the curator of the Main Idea, just an amazing monthly tool of summaries on essential education books. And together, they're the authors of two books, The Best of the Marshall Memo, book 1 and 2, Ideas and Action Steps to Energize Leadership, Teaching, and Learning. And now they've placed together this amazing website offerings that you can find at thebestofmarshallmemo.org. Last time we were together, we talked about the research you guys have been doing and sharing through your website. And I wanted to just continue that conversation because this is so valuable. But before I do, in case someone's listening for the first time, if you guys want to fill in the gaps, something else they may be surprised to know about you in the work that you do or the lives that you live.
Well, thanks for having us, Will. It's great to be here, and we're happy to provide all these resources for free online. In addition to running the Main Idea, I also run masterminds, as you do, which are for people who want to take a deeper dive into their own professional learning, school district leaders, where I meet for 1 hour every other week to do reading, professional learning, strategy sharing, problem solving, feedback. And I think it's the best professional learning I've been involved with school leaders. How about you, Kim?
So my routine is that every Sunday I sit down and I read through the 150 or so articles that have come in that week because I subscribe to everything. And then on Monday, I sit down and write summaries of the 5 or 6 or so articles that I've chosen out of that huge haystack of articles, the few needles in the haystack that are the best and most practical for teachers. And then I send that out. So that's sort of a fairly random collection of the articles, the best articles that happen to come in that week. But then everything gets uploaded to a website. And then Jenn David Lang and I went into this website, spent 2 years going into the website, finding the very, very best of the best of the best on these specific topics. And now the latest one, which we're about to upload, is this supporting new teachers.
I love it. Well, let me begin with this question. And I know that when I'm asking questions based on the resources that you guys are pointing to, that I'm referring to the work that you've compiled on the 15 articles around supporting new teachers. And so for Principal Matters listeners, I would really encourage you to go back to last week's episode, which was episode 461, to get the beginning of this conversation. But I wanted to continue by, this may be a question that I put this in quotes. What characteristics define, quote unquote, the right teachers to retain? And how do you recommend that schools identify and support them? And, even asking that question out loud, I'm already thinking about the different contexts that listeners might be in. But let's go there first. What are some things that you would say to a leader that's trying to decide who's the right person to hold on to, and how do I identify and support them?
Well, I think of my principal in my first year in 1969, walking by my classroom and hearing me shouting at kids. And at one point, I think a whole ream of paper was thrown out the window. And could very well conclude that Kim Marshall was just no way he's going to survive as a teacher. Don't even try to help him. And so I think it's a judgment call. Is there some potential there? With a little redirection and support, can this teacher make it? And so I think that is I think you're asking a very difficult question there, is how can you spot, because as one of the articles in the chapter so poignantly puts it, oftentimes we are retaining mediocre teachers, and then we're losing teachers who have the most potential. So how can you spot those teachers? And I think there are ways to do it. And one of the most important things is getting into their classrooms. There's this myth that new teachers, you should leave them alone because you're gonna freak them out if the principal comes into their classroom. And meanwhile, the new teachers are saying, no, come in, give me some help here, help me get my feet under me here. And sometimes the simplest advice can be the best one. For example, Jenn mentioned the issue of strong voice. In fact, I just heard this the other day. Somebody did a recording of a teacher, and every sentence ended with an up. It's called upspeak, so, and it conveys to the children this tentative nature. Like, I'm kind of making a request here of you that you line up for lunch rather than please line up for lunch. And so just a simple advice, but then again, spotting the person who takes that advice and who begins to get their feet under them, get their act together so that we do keep the best people.
I want to pick up on the theme of feedback. So when you ask Will about retaining the quote unquote right teachers, this is a chapter about new teachers. So we're talking about new teachers, right? So we're not talking about a track record of impact on student achievement, right? Because that's obviously what we want for our teachers, but you don't know that by October or November, right? So I really would say two things. One, yes, as the leader, you should absolutely be going in and giving feedback early. But what I would look for is how does the new teacher respond to the feedback? And in fact, I think that's one of the number one things to look at in a teaching demo. I think most of us who have been teachers ourselves and are good at professional learning, we can train someone, but not if they're resistant to feedback. So I would look at that in the interview and then the first few months. And then the second thing is relationships, 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 right? I mean, what is the relationship? What is the feeling like in the classroom? What the students report? Students are actually very accurate when it comes to their assessment of teachers. What are their relationships with their colleagues like? Are they bringing the team up, or are they contributing to the toxicity level of the fifth grade team? So I would focus on those two: response to feedback and relationships, relationships, relationships.
And I would add one more thing there. I remember years ago, there was something called the Haberman Urban Teachers Selection Interview. And one of the questions in it, and it was very well regarded. I don't think it's out there anymore, was basically picking up on who the teacher blames. Do they blame the kids? Do they blame poverty? Do they blame, the fact that the Xerox machine keeps breaking down? Or do they take responsibility and begin to see it's on me? Like I need to really improve some specific things, whether I'm listening to the kids, the principal, a mentor teacher down the hall, my mother, whoever is counseling me. And back to Jenn's point, are they listening and are they picking up on that?
So much wisdom. And I'm with you, Kim. If someone had tried to gauge my success as a teacher based on my first interactions with kids, they, they would have told me to pick a different profession. Um, there's a really beautiful story in one of the articles that highlighted Rebecca Peterson, the 2023 National Teacher of the Year, who I've actually had a chance to meet a couple of times because she lives in Oklahoma, just a beautiful person. And she talks about a turning point that helped her prevent burnout. And for her, that turning point was the recognition of her own practices and trying to identify not just the challenges I'm facing each day and what's my responsibility in it, but also where can I find celebration in each day and with kids. And so let's talk about that a little bit too. How can leaders help teachers, especially newer teachers, to not just address how to get better, but also to address the joy of the work too?
Well, when you go to the website, this is article number 8, and it's one of those close calls. I mean, she almost quit, right? She almost gave up in her first year, but then she heard about this thing called One Good Thing. And every day when she went home in tears, just feeling so discouraged and so down on herself, and these kids won't listen to me, and they're not behaving and they're not learning and so forth. But she thought back about one good thing that happened that day. So one boy tried a little harder, or one girl, actually, came to her for advice, or one thing happened and she disciplined herself. And this is where, again, this is a quality you're looking for in the teacher. Can they have a little self-discipline, little ability to apply something like that every single day? And she applied it, and it really began to turn her around, her attitude around. And again, the sense of efficacy, the sense you can make a difference. And then I think she had her kids do it too, right? So the kids began to think about one good thing every day. So a very concrete strategy. So this is, the variety of articles on this website, excuse me, in this topic, goes from holistic solutions and things the leadership team needs to do to very granular, specific things that here's what one teacher did. And she went on to be the teacher of the year, so go figure.
Well,
And I think,
go ahead, Jenn.
oh, I was just going to say, and then to sort of zoom back. So this is what one teacher did. And if your audience consists more of leaders, right? So what can you do as a leader? I think it's to acknowledge the whole emotional interpersonal side of the job. And, we see newer teachers who struggle, almost quit, and we think, oh, I'm not a therapist, right? Or I'm not a counselor, right? But it would help as leaders to acknowledge that, the stress can get so much that you want to, quit, throw in the towel, cry, stay home sick. And here are some strategies, and really to develop the emotional intelligence and emotional resilience of our teachers and not poo-poo it as, oh, yeah, this is a counseling situation.
I love that. I want to move forward to a question about the because one of your articles touched on this, the hesitation of teachers to ask for help.
Hmm.
And then when I hold the mirror up to myself and I look back at my years in school administration, one of my biggest regrets was not even knowing a teacher was struggling until they're handing in their letter of resignation at the end of the year. And so I'm not asking this question because I've done it right every time. But what do you think are some of the cultural shifts that need to happen to reduce this reluctance for teachers to ask for help?
Well, one of the first things would be to move away from a once-a-year teacher evaluation process, usually done at the end of the year, to frequent informal visits and frequent informal conversations, ideally in the teacher's classroom when the kids aren't there, on their home turf, where they're much more likely to do what you asked about, Will, to ask to say, I'm really struggling with this, or I'm really having trouble with this, and then to open up. And again, I think part of this is bringing the stakes down. Like, it's not my job that's on the line. We're talking about one specific, second period class in this algebra class, this particular thing happened, and help me out with this, and very concrete advice. So I think part of that is just getting this, reducing the stakes of this process, so the administrator is more accessible, and so the teacher is more likely to reach out and get some help.
And I want to add to that, in addition to having these, debriefing or one-on-one meetings, I think to normalize the asking for help, having a structure where, share one thing that's going well for you and one thing where you could use help. I don't think we should wait for new teachers to come to us and bring it up. And you're having a conversation about something, that was observed in the classroom, and the teacher has to, on him or herself, put it on themselves to say, hey, I could really use help with this. So instead, just normalize it, right? Okay, what's one thing going well for you? What's one thing that I could support you better with? Oh, I'm having a terrible time with classroom management, and I just, my fourth period class, I feel like a failure, right? So don't wait for the teachers to come to you.
I was just talking to another guest for the podcast, and we were talking about this off recording. And so it's just not fresh on my mind. And so both of you are reminding me that I don't think I realized until way into my career the power of reflection for getting better. And it's actually Pete Hall's an author I like to read, and I heard him once say, experience is not the best teacher. Reflecting on experience is the best teacher. And so what I just heard you say, in Jen, was, okay, well, how can we intentionally and purposefully invite people to reflect with us instead of waiting until an evaluation, like you said, Kim? How can we invite them into reflection? And a good buddy of mine, Frederick Buskey, he has this little tool he calls the 5-minute coach, where he has 3 questions that he always asks teachers, often just when he stops by their rooms. 1, what went well today? Or what went well in your lesson you just did? 2, were there any surprises? And 3, is there anything you do differently? That's it. No judgment, no commentary, just reflection. So I love that. Anything else you want to add to ways that we can create a better culture of people asking for help?
Well, another very concrete thing principals do is they do the schedule for the school. And so they can orchestrate who is free, well, not really free, who has a planning period at the same time. And so getting people to meet together with the other fourth grade teachers, or the other world history teachers, or the other French teachers, assuming there's more than one. And by the way, if there is only one, the so-called lonely singleton, then encouraging them to get online, because we all learned how to do Zoom talks, over the pandemic. And so now we can get online with the other German teachers around, the state of Massachusetts, or the other, French teachers or Arabic teachers or whatever, or physics teachers. Usually, often there's only one physics teacher in a high school. So anyway, orchestrating those meetings and then making sure that there's facilitation and support, because the question you want to hear in a good teacher team meeting is, Jen, your kids did better than mine. What did you do? That's the golden question. And Karen Chenoweth says, from superintendent to superintendent, principal to principal, and teacher to teacher, when you hear that question, talking about actual student results and talking specific classroom practices that are bringing about better student learning and better student morale and better student belief and everything. So I think organizing the meetings, back to the schedule, I think the schedule is one of the most powerful tools for school leadership, and just making sure that new teachers in particular are on a team with regular meetings with people who are going to be supportive and not say, that Kim Marshall, what a wimp, he's never going to make it.
And in addition to the schedule, I think to get to that question where you could say to a colleague, oh, your students did better than mine, I think what we're talking about is what is the culture we need to create so that first year and newer teachers feel comfortable sharing vulnerabilities, right? Dan Coyle found that teams that share vulnerabilities are some of the most successful teams out there. And one of the first things you do is model it as the leader, right? Admit when you make mistakes, share an anecdote or a story about your first year of teaching and not having it all figured out. But I think that is some of what contributes is a culture where people are regularly sharing, these are my mistakes, my areas for growth, my shortcomings, and that's okay.
So in this area of the website on the Best of Memo website on supporting new teachers, the fourth article by Susan Moore Johnson, Matthew Kraft, and John Pepe. That is the article where it really gets down to the leadership orchestration of meetings, support, coaching, and mentoring, and so forth. It makes all the difference for new teachers.
I love that. I want to respond to something you said earlier, Ken, and you mentioned this too, Jen, which is the power of the master schedule. And again, this is just a quick Will story, but I remember years ago we had a master teacher that we were moving into an instructional coach role. And one of the first conversations she had with us as an admin team was, can we rework our master schedules so that we can give teachers more time to collaborate within their subject areas? And I remember at the time, Kim, I'd been an admin for quite a while by then. And I said it out loud. I was like, we've tried before. We can't do that. That's what came out of my mouth. And she said, well, can I try? And I was like, yeah, go for it. So I gave her access to the master schedule. Guess what? We could do it. So it just took someone who believed that we could do it to actually figure out how to do it. And it was such a great humbling moment for me. And we were both really good friends. So this was also a moment for her to be able to chuckle later and say, see, well, I told you we could do this. But that movement was so powerful.
I'm going to take a wild guess here. Was that person a math teacher?
She was a science teacher. So yes.
so they're the people who can figure out these scheduling dilemmas.
You're so right.
Yep.
Her science brain went, oh yeah, I can do this. I'll figure this out. Oh my gosh. There's so many great articles in here. And I don't even, I know there's no way we can get to all of them, but I know that as you go down through these, Article 9 talks about just, in addition to what we can do to support teachers, there's also the need though for them to build their own self-efficacy and resilience. So can we talk a little bit about that? What does some of the research say about building resilience for this important work?
So Jen, talk about Jennifer Gonzalez and almost crying in front of her class. That's Article 9.
Oh, me, Jen. Okay.
Oh, sorry.
Yes. Yes. So yes. So this is an article, and the reason why. So we organize these. So some of the articles are directly aimed at teachers. So I think this is a great one to share with your newer teachers, because Jennifer describes a day in her fourth year of teaching where she almost cried in front of her students. And first of all, I love the vulnerability that she would share that she has a huge national audience. But I think it's helpful for new teachers to see that and somebody who is quite successful, that even she had that experience. And so she's like, okay, so what's the takeaway? What's the point of me sharing this anecdote? And it's to remind us to help our teachers think about, what are the factors that led up to that, right? Feeling overwhelmed, feeling disrespected by students. They can smell a new teacher from a mile away, right? So all of those feelings. And so what are some skills, again, like I was saying before, that a leader can help instill and teach in new teachers? And yes, I think we do as leaders need to build emotional resilience. This is a job, we're not working on factory lines, putting out cans of Coca-Cola, right? We're working with other people, colleagues, teachers, and we are working with little people in the room who have emotions. So I think, paying attention to your emotions is okay, right? Teaching teachers some skills, how much you reframe that, right? How much you focus on what did go well, like the Tulsa Teacher of the Year. So I think again that's got to come from the top and perhaps modeling as well. Like, oh, today was a really upsetting day. This happened. I'm going to take a few minutes before we start the staff meeting, or modeling, acknowledging, and managing your own emotions first is a great way to start.
So in the latter part of this article, after Jenn, and by the way, Jenn Gonzalez is just an amazing writer, and she does this thing called cult of pedagogy, and she's one of my favorite go-to authors for the Marshall Memo. But at the end of this article, she talks about a specific technique that she developed over the years as a teacher in an upsetting situation where a class is kind of getting out of control and something. She just sits down with a pad of paper, sits down at the front of the class, and says nothing. And, things sort of settle down. The kids say, well, what's she doing? And then she starts looking around and then she starts writing things on the little pad of paper. And what she's doing in her own head is she's looking around for positive things. She's looking around for what is right here. Was it really as bad as I thought it was? Is it my fault? How many kids are really misbehaving? But that technique, I mean, that's just, a very specific thing to sit down with a pad of paper and say nothing and start writing. I mean, how about that? Might not work every time, but in this case, yeah.
No, but what I love about that, and now I'm going to just take this conversation and point it directly back to our listeners for a moment, because if you're listening to this podcast, you're likely currently leading in a school setting, or maybe you're an aspiring leader. So we run the gamut, people that are both listening as newer leaders, experienced leaders. But if we want to create cultures that um, welcome feedback, if we want to create cultures where we're willing to be vulnerable with our own struggles, if we want to create cultures where we're willing to look for the positives and celebrate them, not just manage the negatives, we have to model it first. And so one of the things I like to so one of the ways I like to apply when I'm reading really good research like this, Jenn and Kim, is first of all, I have to hold the mirror up to myself and say, how am I modeling this? When I'm leading a professional development, when I'm leading a staff meeting, when I'm introducing myself to a new group of potential students, whether that's adults or kids, um, am I doing the same things that I'm going to invite others to do? Because our teacher also, our newest teachers especially, are also watching their leaders,
Hmm.
to model for them the way that they interact with students. And so there's a lot of power in us modeling the things that we know good teachers need for their own resilience and efficacy too. Anything you want to add to that before I ask the next question?
There we have two articles by Jennifer Gonzalez, and the second one she refers to a book by Elena Aguilar, who's another fantastic author and resource that we focus on. I've summarized her book. It's called Onward: Cultivating Emotional Resilience in Educators, and she shares 12 strategies for building emotional resilience. And one idea, given that there are 12 months of the year, she suggests, introducing one at a time. And so, if you take Will's idea of holding up the mirror and starting with yourself, right, you could divide these 12 resilience building strategies into the months of the year, and not only model it but say it out loud, that this is the skill that I'm modeling, this is the one I'm going to bring up in PD. But she has a lot of really strong strategies, and the book is a great resource. The book also has there's also a playbook that goes with it too.
Hmm.
I love it. Well, as we wrap up, I want to give listeners an opportunity. First of all, bestofmarshallmemo.org is where you're going to find this amazing resource where Kim and Jenn are just taking the same information that you guys have compiled in your wonderful books and are available through your websites. Now you're curating them again, so that readers have an opportunity to just take the best of. And but as we wrap up, I want to give you both an opportunity to tell listeners how they can stay connected with you, not just through that website, but through your work individually, and anything else that you'd like to share. That's just a parting word of wisdom or advice for leaders that are trying to make the best of the great teachers that are in their care.
So one other thing that's on this website which is a tab at the very top. It's called All Faculty Discussions. And Will, I don't know if you discovered this one, but what's on this website is a super curation of thousands of articles in specific topic areas. But then there's an even more super curation of articles that are suitable for bringing to a faculty meeting the summary, the Marshall Memo summary, having everyone read it silently, then get in groups and do a protocol discussion in a small group, then come back and talk, with the whole staff. And so this is their only 25 articles out of thousands and thousands of articles. So you pull down this tab at the top of their website on the home page, all faculty discussions, and you can see the titles and you can click and get the summary. So that is a practice that I never used as a principal, but I think it's a very powerful practice. It's just, 5 minutes of silent reading, reading the summary, discussion in small groups. But of course, it has to be the right article. And these articles are chosen so they pertain to a whole school, whether it's kindergarten to 12th grade or whatever it is, and just spark really good on the ground discussions about things that a whole school needs to be paying attention to. So that is another feature to take advantage of on the website.
Oh, wow. Thank you, Kim.
And I will say that the two things that accomplishes are very important for new leaders. One is learning, right? We say, oh, they're first year teachers, they don't have time for learning. We're talking about reading for 5 minutes, and they do absolutely need to learn. They have to be a learner from day one. That's part of the, being humble and learning when you have the kids who are climbing on top of desks the first year. I can learn and I can make this better. It's part of the developing a growth mindset in our young educators. So first of all, it's learning. And then it's also learning in collaboration with others. And so I think those are two things that first year teachers need a lot, is working collaboratively with their peers and learning. So I think the suggestion Kim gave is a perfect one.
So one of the things is, this group of 15 articles, it takes a little under an hour to read, or if you're listening to the recording, about an hour of listening. And so the question is, how would a school leader use this? And one of the things that I've done with groups, and this could be for any of the articles that are groups that are on this website, is to get a group of people together, have all of them get out their phones, find this website, and then simply assign around the room. If there are 15 people in the room, you read Article 1, you read Article 2, and then everyone reads it silently. And then you go around and each person gives a brief summary of the article. I did this with a group of educators in Bedford-Stuyvesant in New York. It was the leadership team of an amazing school. And we did the collection of articles on beliefs about students, which is quite a remarkable collection of articles. And each person, I didn't give them any choice. You're reading Article 1, and then when they summarize, and people were drawing these incredibly powerful conclusions about their own coming up as students, the kind of teachers they had, their parents, and so forth. And just in 35 minutes, we were able to pull together the wisdom of all these articles. So that's one way of using this collection of articles, whether it's this one or one of the other ones.
That's so brilliant. I'm going to give kudos to a friend of mine, Dr. Gracie Branch, who works for the National Association of Elementary School Principals. She was the former executive director for Oklahoma's Association of Elementary School Principals. She calls that the jigsaw, the jigsaw learning. And I've seen her do that in settings, and I've done that too, Kim. And it's so listeners, if you're looking for powerful PD that you could be implementing yourself, you don't need an expert in the room. You can find these resources at bestofmarshallmemos.org. Or Kim, where else would you want them to look?
Well, no, I think if you're a super nerd, you go into the Marshall Memo Archive. You do a search there. But there's thousands and thousands of articles. So that's one place. But definitely there's a wealth of stuff here. And I've been doing the memo for 21 years. Jenn has been doing the main idea for how many years, Jenn, now?
Think about 18.
Whoa. Okay. So and all of our stuff is online. And so, you can, again, if you want to do a particularly focused study on a particular topic, like teaching world languages, or, dealing with kids with special needs or dyslexia, or for example, a hot topic right now is this whole science of reading issue, the whole issue of teaching phonics and broad literacy effectively in the primary grades. So you can do a deep dive, in the website about that.
And if you want to do a deeper dive into the books, a lot of the articles also, like I mentioned in the first episode, Paul Bambrick Santoyo's book, Get Better Faster, I have a summary of his book, or Elena Aguilar's Onward, I have a summary of her book. So you can find those at themainidea.net too.
Also, you did Teach Like a Champion too, right?
Yeah, Teach Like a Champion. A lot of these books, there's a book about teacher burnout by Chase Milkey. We have an article in this chapter. I have a summary of his book.
Well, Principal Matters listeners, I'm just smiling because I get to be in the room with Kim Marshall and Jenn David Ling for this conversation. And you guys, I just want to say this out loud because it's important for me to commend the great work for people contributing to education in such valuable ways. Thank you both for the ways that you've contributed to this field. not just here in the US. I know people around the world read your content. And Principal Matters listeners, we will put links in the show notes for their websites, for their combined work together, their contact information if you want to reach out to either one of them, not just for their resources, but they both also lead amazing professional development. They both do great keynote speeches. They're just wonderful resources for schools that want to grow and get better. So Kim, Jenn, thank you so much for the time you spent sharing with us. And Principal Matters listeners, thank you for doing what matters, and we'll talk to you again soon. Thank you for listening to today's episode of Principal Matters, the School Leaders Podcast. If you enjoyed the show, would you take a moment and like, share, subscribe, or leave us a review? In fact, if you share it out with a friend, even more people can become a part of these conversations. Sign up for our newsletter at williamdparker.com for even more free resources. And don't forget to check out our website to learn more about our books, professional development offerings, Grow Academies, masterminds, executive coaching, and keynote presentations. Wow, let's keep learning together. And thank you for doing what matters.
Principal Matters.